Hello and welcome! In this lecture we're going to add some nice screen shake to our game. Okay, so here's what we have so far. We have our units, I can move them, and I can also take a shoot action, and let's shoot this enemy, and there you go, aims and shoots. So it works, and the action camera is really nice, but it would look a bit nicer with some screen shake, so let's add that. Doing this is actually going to be super simple since we're using Cinemachine. First up, let's go into our Cinemachine virtual camera. And then in the inspector down here we can see something called extensions, and if we add one we see all kinds of things. So in this case let's add a Cinemachine impulse listener. Here it is. We can play around these settings, but for now let's leave them all at defaults. Now like it says here, the impulse listener will respond to signals from the Cinemachine impulse source. So let's make a game object to fire that. Let's create a brand new game object and call this screen shake. Let's reset the transform, and now let's add a component and search for Cinemachine Impulse. Here it is, the Cinemachine Impulse source. And again, over here we have various settings. For now, let's leave them on the defaults. Now let's make a script that will actually fire this impulse. So on our scripts folder, let's create a brand new C# script called the screen shake. Let's attach it to this same game object and open. Now here, let's first of all grab the Cinemachine Impulse source component. So for that we need to add using Cinemachine. And now we can add a field, so private, look for Cinemachine Impulse source. So here it is, this type, Cinemachine Impulse source, and on private void awake, over here we just do Cinemachine Impulse source and we get the component Cinemachine Impulse source. Okay, so now we just need to call a function on this component. So let's make a simple test, so a private void update, and on update let's listen to some input. So let's say get key down, let's test with keycode.t. When that happens, go into the Cinemachine impulse source, and here we call the function generate impulse. Okay, so just with this let's test. So here we are, and if we press on T, and yep, there you go, we have a nice screen shake. Okay, great. So this is all that we need to do. We just fire off the impulse. Now that we have this working, we can play around the settings. So let's minimize the game window in order to be able to see them. Let's first of all handle the impulse. So let's select the screen shake object. So here it is, and again we press T and we can see it. All right, so now let's play around these settings. First thing you can do is over here the impulse shape. So these are all kinds of curves, as you can see. You can even create your own custom curve. You can see, for example, the explosion. This one is going to shake a lot and then a tiny bit. So if we press, there you go, a big shake and then small. Put on recall, just like that. And if you put on rumble, it does this. So I think the rumble is the one that looks best for our use case. Then over here, you can also say how long the curve lasts. In our case, for a ball turn explosion, we want it to be super quick. So let's go with just 0.1. And finally down here for the default velocity. This is how the camera actually shakes. So right now as I press T, note how the camera goes down and then bounces back up and so on. That is because the default velocity we've got on -1, but I think it actually looks better if it moves up rather than down. And let's make it a bit less intense, so in here instead of -1, let's go with positive plus 0.3. Okay, so like this I think it looks a bit better. It's a bit more subtle, a bit more interesting. Okay, so these are the settings on the impulse source. Then we've got some more on the virtual camera, but before we set those, right now we are in play mode where we're making these changes. If we stop playing, we're going to lose these changes. So before we do that, let's right click on the component and let's copy the component. Then we can stop playing, and now right click on the component and paste component values. Okay, there it is, everything pasted. Now let's go here into the Cinemachine virtual camera. And then we have the settings for the impulse listener. And the main one we want is down here, the reaction settings. We've got a secondary noise. So let's select this one and use one of these presets. Let's go with the 6D shake. And then for the amplitude, this is kind of how intense it is. Then the frequency, which is kind of how much the intensity changes. And then finally duration, let's go 0.5. Okay, so let's go with these settings. And if we now hit on play, here we are. And if I do a screen shake, yep, there you go. You see it has a bit more noise, a bit more jittery. So I think it looks a bit better than without it. Okay, so like this, our screen shake is looking pretty good. So now back in our code, let's make a proper function to call this. So let's make a public void, just call it shake. And also here, let's receive a float for the intensity. And if we want, we can also default it to 1F, just to make it optional. And then here we just do this line. So just do generate impulse. And then we've got an optional float that we can pass in the intensity or the force, same thing. All right, so that's it. So now here we can get rid of the testing code. So on this script, it's all functional. Now, in order to be able to easily call this function from outside, let's once again implement the singleton pattern. So we can copy what we did a long time ago on the unit action system. So let's go up here. Let's first copy the instance. So on the screen shake, paste the instance. And then also over here on awake, let's copy this. And on screen shake, let's paste it. And just change the type. So screen shake on here and here. All right, so we have a static instance, and through that we can access the shake. So now just to verify this is working, let's go into our regular testing script. Over here we already got a get key down on T. So let's just go into the screen shake, access the instance, do shake, and then pass in the intensity. So for this one, let's say 5F. Okay, so let's test and see if this single line, if does everything we want. So here we are, and press on T, and yep, there you go, we've got a really nice shake. Okay, awesome. Now what we want is to add a nice shake when we fire off the bullet. So here we actually have another code design question. Technically we could go here directly into the shoot action. And then when we have the on shoot, so when we shoot over here we could go into screen shake. So do exactly what we're doing on the testing. So we could come up here and do exactly this. That would work. However, again, in doing so it would make both these classes tightly coupled. So if we remove the screen shake, then the game would break. Now maybe that's not such a big problem. Screen shake is pretty integral to the whole game, so you can decide that you always want it to exist. But still, since we already have a on-shoot event, then let's keep things nicely decoupled. So on this action, we're only going to handle the shoot action, and then the screen shake is only going to handle shake. And then we're going to have a third script, pretty much just listening to the events and doing the connection between both of them. So let's do that. Let's get rid of this one here. And also on the testing, let's get rid of this. We no longer need it. So now in the editor, let's make that script. So create a new C# script, call it the screen shake actions, and let's make a game object to run it. So an empty game object. For that, drag the script, reset the transform, and open. And now here we need to know when a bullet has been fired. Now on the shoot action, over here we already have this event. However, this one is an instance event, meaning that if we wanted to listen to this one, then we would need to keep track of all the units that have shoot actions. So instead of doing this, let's do like we've already seen. So let's copy this and make another event, but this one is static, and call it on any shoot. So with this, and now let's just fire it on the exact same place where we're firing off this one. So let's do the exact same thing, but here on any shoot. All right, so that's it. Now we have this nice static event. So on the screen shake action script over here, make a private void start, and on start, let's go into the shoot action and listen to the on any shoot event. So let's just subscribe and make this function. And here, if you want, let's use the lightbulb method to automatically generate. Okay, so we have this function. Now when you have this, it's super simple. Let's just go into screen shake, the instance, and shake. All right, so that's it. This is really all it takes. So let's test. So here we are. Let's go into the shoot action and let's shoot, aims, and nope, it did not work. Now the reason for this is because when we go into the shoot mode, for this one we're using the action virtual camera. If you want a virtual camera to listen to the impulse, then it needs that extension. So here on main Cinemachine virtual camera, we do have that listener. However, if we look into our action virtual camera, this one does not. So if we want this one to shake, then we need to implement that. So let's go into the Cinemachine virtual camera. Let's copy this component, go into the action virtual camera. Let's paste component as new, and yep, there it is. So now if we test, so here, let's go into the shoot action, aim, and boom, there you go, we've got a nice shot. Okay, great, so everything worked. So as soon as the bullet was fired, the unit fired off a really nice screen shake in order to make the shoot action feel much more impactful. There it is, really nice. All right, great. So here we implemented a nice screen shake that we can use anywhere we want to give our game a bit more power. Now that we have a nice shake, let's make a nice explosion in the next lecture.